Good evening. Welcome to News Plus here on Loveworld USA. I'm TGK Andre. Let's take a quick look at the top headline stories we have today. Federal officials condemn violent anti-ICE protests in Los Angeles and New York. GOP leaders urge Trump and Musk to reconcile amid feud. Real estate investor blames Fed Chair Powell for housing market struggles. Colombian president vows action after teen arrested in shooting a presidential hopeful. These and more stories in the news. Federal authorities are condemning what they describe as dangerous rhetoric from Democratic leaders after immigration and customs enforcement officers were targeted by violent mobs during enforcement operations in Los Angeles and New York City over the weekend. According to the Department of Homeland Security, more than 1,000 individuals surrounded the Roy Ball Federal Building in Los Angeles on Friday, following multiple immigration-related issues. ICE reported that assaults against its officers had surged by over 400%, and agents' families have recently been doxxed. ICE confirmed the arrest of 118 illegal immigrants in Los Angeles this week, including individuals with prior convictions for gang affiliation, drug trafficking, and child cruelty. Nationally, 2,000 individuals were detained. In New York, a separate protest took place outside the Jacob Javits Federal Building. NYPD said 5 demonstrators were taken into custody after blocking traffic and refusing orders to disperse. DHS officials and ICE leadership issued statements criticizing local and state officials for what they view as inflammatory language and inadequate support. Military helicopters and the National Guard were deployed in California as tensions escalated. Let's take a look.
Many riots broke out when activists decided that they were going to apparently storm a migrant detention center and trap some federal agents inside until they could eventually be rescued by other law enforcement. Elsewhere in the city, ICE agents were barricaded inside a store for their own safety after an angry crowd tried to stop them arresting to deport illegal migrants. I gotta say, it feels like we're about to see a replay of 2020's Summer of Love in the U.S., only with radicals targeting armed ICE agents instead of Main Street shopkeepers. Well, yeah, I'm sure that's going to go really well for them.
Of course, in the United States, the First Amendment does protect the freedom to protest and the freedom to petition. But you have to understand that there's a line between a peaceful, impactful protest and violent protest that eventually lead nowhere. In this situation, and I've said it time and time again here on the Loveworld USA stations, the people that you actually feel bad for are the illegal migrants, the undocumented immigrants themselves, because they're almost caught in the crossfire of a proxy war between the leftist agenda and the government officials. So now, when you think about their situation, you're thinking about the riots, you're thinking about the violence, you're thinking about the crimes that they've committed, and those are being highlighted because, again, ICE is trying to go in after the criminals. But when it all gets mixed up, then the criminals and those who just came in illegally and have tried to live a peaceful life get conflated together. And this is reminiscent of what happened during the George Floyd movement and the protests in the 2020s. Earlier on in the decade, where we had people who were legitimately pushing for fairer policing, and you had the movement get hijacked by those who now, anytime the name George Floyd or Sandra Bland or Tamir Rice were uttered, you have that conflated with looting. You have that conflated with police aggression. Well, with aggression towards police. And the thing is, that's not the goal. You have to keep the main thing here. And it's unfortunate for the people who this is actually affecting now, because their cause, which has a right to be heard, is now going to be heard as something else apart from what it actually is. Because it's different if you're saying, let's not go after, or we're going to stop you from going after those, who haven't done anything. But when you're also defending the criminals as well, that's where the issue comes. So the people who actually aren't supporting the agenda have to get their situation together. Prominent Republicans are urging President Donald Trump and tech entrepreneur Elon Musk to resolve their public feud, citing concerns that the rift could impact party unity and key legislative goals, including a major tax and border bill currently under debate in Congress. The disagreement between the two influential figures escalated after Musk criticized the administration's signature tax and spending legislation, calling it fiscally irresponsible. While neither Musk nor Trump publicly escalated the feud since Friday, Republican lawmakers expressed hope the tensions would ease soon. According to the leaders, the collaboration between the two had yielded positive results in the past and could again. While House Speaker Mike Johnson downplayed the impact of the dispute on legislative efforts, he emphasized Trump's role as the party's leader and warned against underestimating him. As of this moment, there are no public signs of resolution, though some allies expressed optimism that the matter would pass without lasting political damage. Watch this.
The relationship between President Donald Trump and billionaire Elon Musk showed no signs of reconciling on Friday after it imploded this week. After Musk complained about the centerpiece of Trump's legislative agenda, the president let slip that he was disappointed in his former advisor.
Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we're well anymore.
That prompted Musk to unleash a flood of insults and taunts on X. Trump responded with threats to cut government contracts given to Musk's SpaceX rocket company and his Starlink internet satellite services. The explosion of animosity between the two powerful men could also complicate the path forward for Republicans' massive tax and border spending legislation. Republicans are increasingly urging them to settle their dispute. Washington State Rep. Dan Newhouse said he hoped it doesn't distract us from getting the job done, while Texas Senator Ted Cruz said that when the two of them are working together, they'll get a lot more done for America. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries called the Trump-Musk breakup feud a welcome development in his efforts to defeat the GOP tax breaks and spending cuts package.
The opportunity that exists right now is to kill the GOP tax scam. It's legislation that we have been strongly opposed to and uniformly opposed to from the very beginning.
One person familiar with the president's thinking says Musk wants to speak with Trump.
This has been a very impactful development for the GOP. I mean, we are seeing, the president and somebody who people jokingly refer to as the vice president, of course not, going at it online. But part of the issue with this stems from the fact that the president had a track record of being against bills that would increase the U.S. deficit. Unfortunately, now that he's come into office, it seems like he's going back against what he previously believed in, which is where Elon has seemingly drawn the line after his time as special advisor. Of course, they do say that pride goes before a fall, and it's in both of their best interests to resolve this quickly because as Elon, we've seen, he has the capacity financially and strategically to campaign to get things done. And we've seen the approval ratings from the public drop over this big, beautiful bill the more that Elon has campaigned against it publicly on X, the social media platform that he owns, which is also widely considered to be the biggest and most impactful social media platform on the earth. So hopefully, for the good of the country, the president and Mr. Musk should hopefully get everything together sooner rather than later and stop dragging out this feud that only strengthens the opposition. Real estate investor Grant Cardone has criticized Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell for what he describes as significant damage to the U.S. housing market. Speaking on Fox Business, Cardone said Powell's interest rate policies have negatively impacted the middle class and contributed to a growing housing crisis. Cardone pointed to high interest rates as the primary reason many Americans are unable to afford homes, citing an excess supply over demand in the current market. According to him, reduced rates would encourage buyer activity, which he believes is necessary for market stability. Following its May meeting, the Federal Open Market Committee opted to keep interest rates unchanged, maintaining a target range of 4.25% to 4.5%. Cardone argues this decision continues to suppress buyer engagement despite falling inflation rates. President Donald Trump, who has previously clashed with Powell, echoed similar sentiments on Truth Social, calling for a full percentage point rate cut and labeling Powell's timing as too late. Trump suggested such a cut would serve as rocket fuel for the economy. And honestly, in this light, the president has every right to say this. The Fed Chair Jerome Powell has had a track record of coming in a bit too late in situations. He acted too late to start the Trump administration. He acted too late to end the Trump administration. And his rate cuts haven't matched the plan that the Feds have seemingly set out for the public to view. He's been playing it very cautiously, but we have to understand that the reason that the housing market is actually afloat is because the Federal Mortgage Association has kept houses that should have been on the market off the market to balance the supply and demand. But that's unsustainable because holding houses off markets just add more funds that are accrued to a house that's just sitting there not being sold. But then on the other hand, the interest rates are higher than they should be considering the inflation target that the Fed set, and we are very close to meeting. Meaning that people are waiting for that inflation rate to go down so that they can buy a house, and they're not budging. Because as we know, Redfin has reported that there are more houses on the market, I believe, by between 13 and 30% than there are actual buyers. Meaning that if anything, it's more of a buyer's market than it is a seller's market. And the buyers don't want to buy because the interest rates are too high. Because there's actually more buyers than sellers, but there's more houses on the market than buyers are actually willing to go after. Meaning that in order for this to change and for the housing market to continue flowing, we have to reduce the interest rates to allow buyers to come in to a more competitive market, which will then also help sellers who can get the houses off the market and may eventually end up as buyers. But that all lies in the hands of the Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Colombian President Gustavo Petro has pledged a full investigation into the shooting of opposition senator and presidential hopeful Miguel Uribe, who remains in critical condition after being shot twice during a campaign event in Bogotá. Authorities say a 15-year-old suspect was arrested carrying a Glock pistol. Uribe, a member of the conservative Democratic Center Party and grandson of former President Julio César Turbay Ayala, was addressing a crowd in the Fontibón district when shots rang out. Video footage captured the chaos as Uribe collapsed and was rushed to a hospital. He has undergone neurosurgical procedures and remains in intensive care. President Petro condemned the attack, vowing to pursue the mastermind even if they are outside the country. A $730,000 reward has been offered for information. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and multiple former Colombian presidents also issued strong condemnations, warning that such acts threaten democracy. The incident has renewed concerns about political violence in Colombia, recalling past assassinations of presidential candidates. Uribe, who recently announced his candidacy at the site where his mother was killed by the Medellin cartel in 1991, has called for justice without revenge in earlier statements. Let's take a look.
Colombian opposition senator Miguel Uribe, a potential presidential contender, was rushed to hospital after being shot at a political event in Bogotá on Saturday, where his wife said he was fighting for his life. Authorities said they arrested a minor under 15 years of age, saying he was carrying a 9mm Glock pistol-type firearm. President Petro Gustavo said he has ordered an investigation to find out who was behind the attack. 39-year-old Uribe is a member of the opposition Conservative Democratic Center Party who hopes to become its official 2026 presidential candidate. He was shot by armed subjects from behind during a campaign event in a public park, according to a party statement condemning the attack. It did not give further details on his condition, but reports said he had multiple gunshot wounds, including to the head. Uribe's wife wrote on his X account that he was, quote, fighting for his life. People gathered outside the Santa Fe Foundation Hospital, where Uribe was being treated, to show support. Some also protested against the leftist president, chanting "Petro out," accusing him of political violence. This man said he felt sadness and anger at what is happening in the country. No one can express themselves, he said. Whoever expresses a different opinion gets murdered. The presidency issued a statement saying the government categorically and forcefully rejected the violent attack and called for a thorough probe into the events. Petro later said in a video message that no hypothesis would be ruled out in the investigation. The government is also offering some $730,000 for information in the case.
Honestly, when you look at a situation like this, it makes you grateful, unfortunately, and I say this with as much nuance and poise as possible, for the state of politics in America. Because, of course, politics is divisive. It has to be. And it defines the lives of people for decades and generations to come. But at the end of the day, this is a man who's speaking in a country where there's been a lot of political violence, where candidates and eventual presidents use political violence to eliminate their opponents. This is a man who has already witnessed, narco-terrorism, as we reported. His mother was killed by the Medellin cartel at the height of their power in 1991, which is where he announced his candidacy. This is a man whose family's been used to violence, who is speaking and has actually called for justice and revenge without violence. So it's a shame to see something like this happen to him. And it also makes you grateful that in the United States, despite the deep divide that's currently ongoing across the country, we don't resort to acts like this. I mean, we saw something like this similarly when they tried to assassinate the now President Donald Trump during his campaign. But fortunately, he was a turn away from a much different set of American history. But you have to understand, violence is never the issue in these situations. I mean, no matter how deep it gets. I mean, this is a candidate, for crying out loud. And of course, here at Loveworld USA, we are wishing a very speedy recovery and a full recovery, and our prayers go out to presidential candidate Uribe. We will take a break, and when we return, we'll take a look at some of the stories that made the headlines this week. Don't go anywhere.
This is the month of June. And you already know this June is the month of prayer. And that means that we're going to pray more than we usually do. We're going to add some extra time to our praying. First of all, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I usually send out posts to you for prayer. But in the month of June, every Tuesday, and every Thursday, and every Saturday, you should get messages from your church and your cell on prayer. You're going to be praying, and then also early morning praying. It'll be according to the time zones. All right? So early morning in your time zone. I know you're thinking, so what is early morning? How early is early? Okay, should I give you a range of time or should I give you a specific time? I should give you a specific time. All right? 5, next 1 week. Then at the end of the 1 week, I'll tell you what else we're going to do. So we'll do this every day. So that's a beautiful one.
This excerpt is brought to you by Loveworld News.
Loveworld News, keeping the praise of God on your...
Welcome back. President Donald Trump has signed a new proclamation reinstating travel restrictions on foreign nationals from 12 countries and imposing partial bans on 7 others, citing threats to U.S. national security. The order, which takes effect June 9th, bars entry to individuals from countries identified as non-compliant with U.S. security protocols. The proclamation fully suspends travel from Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, the Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. 7 other countries, Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela, face targeted restrictions, including visa limitations and reduced travel privileges. According to the administration, the countries listed failed to meet minimum security requirements, including proper identity management and information sharing. The move follows a recent domestic attack involving a foreign national, which officials say further underscores the need for strict entry protocols. Critics, including international rights groups and the African Union, have condemned the measure as overly broad and harmful to global engagement. The administration maintains the policy as a necessary safeguard to protect the United States from foreign-based threats. Let's take a look.
The recent terror attack in Boulder, Colorado, has underscored the extreme dangers posed to our country by the entry of foreign nationals who are not properly vetted, as well as those who come here as temporary visitors and overstay their visas. We don't want them. In the 21st century, we've seen one terror attack after another carried out by foreign visa overstayers from dangerous places all over the world. And thanks to Biden's open door policies, today there are millions and millions of these illegals who should not be in our country. In my first term, my powerful travel restrictions were one of our most successful policies, and they were a key part of preventing major foreign terror attacks on American soil. We will not let what happened in Europe happen to America. That's why on my first day back in office, I directed the Secretary of State to perform a security review of high-risk regions and make recommendations for where restrictions should be imposed. Among the national security threats their analysis considered are the large-scale presence of terrorists, failure to cooperate on visa security, inability to verify travelers' identities, inadequate record-keeping of criminal histories, and persistently high rates of illegal visa overstays, and other things. Very simply, we cannot have open migration from any country where we cannot safely and reliably vet and screen those who seek to enter the United States. That is why today I am signing a new executive order placing travel restrictions on countries including Yemen, Somalia, Haiti, Libya, and numerous others. The strength of the restrictions we're applying depends on the severity of the threat posed. The list is subject to revision based on whether material improvements are made, and likewise, new countries can be added as threats emerge around the world. But we will not allow people to enter our country who wish to do us harm, and nothing will stop us from keeping America safe. Thank you very much.
Just as you heard in the video, the president is no stranger to using these tactics, like he did during his first term, where he issued the travel ban on Middle Eastern countries to begin his presidency. He did that in January, I think a week or two after his presidency began. Again, the purpose of this, according to his administration, has always been to ensure that there's proper checks coming through. Of course, he was referring to the act of domestic terrorism, where an illegal Egyptian national threw incendiary devices at a group of Jewish protesters who are walking near his neighborhood. The man actually went on to claim that he had to do that, use an incendiary device. Incendiary meaning that when the device detonates or when it reaches its target, it catches on fire. He had to come up with a makeshift device which targeted children and women because he couldn't get a gun due to his status. So, of course, with that level of reckless abandon that of an illegal foreign national had, the Trump administration decided it was time, because again, he wasn't properly vetted, to put this ban into place to make sure that from these countries who don't have proper identification systems in place that set U.S. standards, that if they want their nationals to come in, you have to know who they are and tell us who they are so that we can know. But we can't let people in from those countries when their own government can't accurately identify them. That's unwise. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's like a child bringing back home a friend from somewhere, but even the child doesn't know who the friend is, where they come from, or the person's real name. But then the parent would allow them into the house? Of course not. Because if the child can't even identify the friend, they're in this class, they go to this school, this is their parents' phone number, this is where they live, what are you supposed to do? And if anything happens, they can just come in and go out and you're none the wiser. So from that perspective, you understand why the president has put that into play. And now it's up to the countries to respond by updating their identification and safety systems to match United States standards if they want their nationals to be able to enter the country. President Joe Biden has dismissed allegations that top aides used an auto pen to conceal his mental fitness during his time in office, calling the claims ridiculous and false. His statement follows an investigation launched by Republicans into whether the mechanical signature device was misused to carry out executive actions without direct presidential oversight. The controversy centers on accusations by President Donald Trump and congressional Republicans that the auto pen was used to sign pardons, executive orders, and proclamations while Biden was allegedly unable to do so himself. Trump called the matter one of the most dangerous and concerning scandals in American history and urged Attorney General Pam Bondi to investigate Biden's senior staff for potentially wielding executive power unlawfully. Biden rejected the claims, stating he personally approved all major decisions and that the investigation was a political distraction. "I made the decisions," Biden said, accusing Republicans of trying to shift focus from legislation he claims would harm working Americans. House Oversight Chairman James Comer is leading the probe, which may include compelling former Biden staffers to testify under oath. Comer has not ruled out the possibility of calling Biden himself to respond to questions if the inquiry escalates. Watch this.
This morning, President Trump ordering the Justice Department to investigate the final years of Joe Biden's presidency. Trump issuing a memo claiming, without evidence, that aides abused the power of presidential signatures through the use of an auto pen, adding that would constitute an unconstitutional wielding of the power of the presidency, a circumstance that would have implications for the legality and validity of numerous executive actions. Trump's order calls into question the legitimacy of Biden's presidential pardons, judicial appointments, and more than 1,000 other documents signed in Biden's final 2 years in office. It comes amid a firestorm surrounding the former president's health and mental fitness.
And maybe even worse than Watergate in some ways.
Right. The new book, Original Sin, claims Biden's inner circle saw that the president was declining and found ways to cover it up, claiming Biden's health had become so severe that there were internal discussions about putting the president in a wheelchair after the election. Biden making light of the claims last week.
You can see that. I'm mentally incompetent, and I can't walk, and I could beat the hell out of both of them.
And overnight, Biden calling Trump's order nothing more than a mere distraction, saying, "I made the decisions during my presidency. I made the decisions about the pardons, executive orders, legislation, and proclamations. Any suggestion that I didn't..."
We spoke about the auto pen months ago, and it's good to see that there's been more follow-up made concerning the situation. Again, due to what was a very obvious mental decline of former President Joe Biden, serious questions have to be asked about how the nation was run to end his presidency. Of course, this is more of a formality, or it has to be more of a formality than anything, because the hope is that the senior aides and the powers that be behind the scenes at the Oval Office weren't puppeteering the government when President Joe Biden was supposed to have the responsibility. That's what we hope for it to be. But of course, this recent bombshell of a book that came out is painting it in a very different light. I mean, the Biden administration, told the world for so long that he was fit, and then we received, released interview audio of President Biden with the FBI, where he couldn't recall sensitive information concerning him, concerning his family, and concerning his parts of his responsibility as president. So that's the kind of evidence that brings things like this into question, but hopefully for the good of the American populace and for the integrity of the United States White House and the Oval Office, that is not true. President Donald Trump confirmed plans to visit China following what he described as very good talk with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The hour-and-a-half phone call, reportedly initiated by the White House, focused on trade and diplomatic relations, marking the first direct communication between the two leaders since the U.S. imposed steep tariffs on Chinese imports earlier this year. Trump stated that both leaders extended mutual invitations for state visits. While China acknowledged inviting Trump, it did not confirm a reciprocal visit by Xi to the U.S. Trump told reporters he would travel to China with First Lady Melania Trump and anticipated Xi would later visit Washington. The call follows rising tensions over a tentative trade truce reached in May. While the U.S. reduced some tariffs and China agreed to lift barriers on critical mineral exports, both countries have since accused each other of breaching the agreement. China denied U.S. claims of trade violations and criticized new American restrictions on semiconductor technology and Chinese student visas. Taiwan also featured in the conversation, with Xi warning the U.S. to handle the issue cautiously. He cautioned against actions that could escalate into conflict following remarks from U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth that described China as an imminent threat to Taiwan's sovereignty. The leaders' renewed contact is seen as a significant step in resetting relations, though underlying disputes over trade, technology, and Taiwan remain unresolved. Watch this.
President Trump welcomed German Chancellor Friedrich Merz to the White House shortly after his high-stakes phone call with China's President Xi Jinping.
We had a very good talk, and we've straightened out any complexity. It's very complex.
The president said the two leaders agreed to resume trade talks, which have recently stalled.
We have a deal with China, as you know, but we were straightening out some of the points, having to do mostly with rare earth.
Well, it's good to see that progress is being made on this front. Here at Loveworld USA, we have kept you up to date with the debate between China. Of course, you know, their foreign secretaries in the United States that span from the Liberation Day tariffs. And it's good to see that after weeks and weeks of deliberation and speculation from different sources, it looks like these two influential, you could even argue the most influential world leaders, have agreed to a sit down to discuss a range of topics, of course, with trade and Taiwan definitely on the table. And of course, when the eventual sit down does happen, be sure to stay here at Loveworld USA, where we will keep you informed on what goes on. We'll be right back with more news. Be sure to stay tuned.
Money is the sign of shortage. Money is not the sign of blessing, it is the sign of shortage. Money is not the evidence of blessing, it is the evidence of shortage. It is the evidence of lack. I know nobody ever told you that. So you better listen to me now. I walk in absolute prosperity, so I can tell you, money is not the sign of prosperity, it's a sign of lack. It's a game that defines the classification of people. Once you are able to see beyond it and understand what God's plan is and who you are not controlled by money. Money becomes your slave. Somebody said, I wish I heard what Pastor just said in the month of May. Month of blessing, I would have applied it. You still have time. We carry all the blessings of the previous month into the new ones. That's what we do. Never let the thought of money control your attitude.
Yes, sir.
You know, there are people who become happy when they have money. And when they don't have it, you can tell. You just look at them, you can tell. You can tell they're broken down. Money's their master. They're worshiping the God of Mammon. When you are delivered from that, or when you've not been enslaved by that, you don't know when you've had money and when you've not had money, because you don't operate with those numbers. La korabakasaya, rabakandalobosia. Are you still there?
Welcome back. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a 29-year-old Salvadorian national, has been returned to the United States to face federal charges after being indicted in Tennessee on 2 counts related to human smuggling. According to court documents unsealed on Friday, Garcia is accused of conspiring to unlawfully transport illegal aliens for financial gain and conducting transportation of undocumented individuals within the U.S. The indictment alleges that Garcia organized a smuggling operation that moved illegal immigrants from Texas to other interior states. Children are reportedly among those transported. Law enforcement sources indicate that Garcia's activity may have spanned several years, with body cam footage from a 2022 Tennessee traffic stop showing Garcia driving with 8 undocumented passengers. At the time, troopers flagged him for possible gang affiliation and notified federal authorities. Garcia was deported in March to El Salvador, where he was reportedly held at the CCOT high-security prison. His removal drew attention after it was revealed that a prior 2019 court order had restricted deportation to El Salvador due to concerns over potential violence. U.S. officials later confirmed that discussions with El Salvador's government had facilitated his return. The Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio have not issued further details on Garcia's case. A federal court has ordered him to appear in Nashville, Tennessee, when the indictment was filed. His legal team denies allegations of gang involvement, while U.S. authorities cite prior alerts linking Garcia to MS-13. Proceedings are expected to begin within the coming week. Watch this.
We're here today to announce a major update in an important case. Abrego Garcia has landed in the United States to face justice. On May 21st, a grand jury in the Middle District of Tennessee returned a sealed indictment charging Abrego Garcia with alien smuggling and conspiracy to commit alien smuggling in violation of Title 8 U.S.C. 1324. We want to thank President Bukele for agreeing to return Abrego Garcia to the United States. Our government presented El Salvador with an arrest warrant, and they agreed to return him to our country. We're grateful to President Bukele for agreeing to return him to our country to face these very serious charges. This is what American justice looks like. Upon completion of his sentence, we anticipate he will be returned to his home country of El Salvador.
Again, this is the issue. This is the concern. The concern is with the leftist agenda, who turned Kilmar into an icon for their strife against ICE. But the issue is that by iconifying him, by iconizing him as one of the faces of the illegal migrant movement, you're putting a criminal up there. I mean, this was the same criticism that agitators used against George Floyd. But in this case, you're putting an actual convicted criminal as the reason that the United States government is acting unfairly towards illegal migrants. And now what you do to the uninformed is that you now paint this picture that, well, look, this is who we're defending, and by defending him, we're defending all illegal migrants. Now that has been revealed, this is a man who has apparently, with body cam footage, been acting as a coyote. A coyote, you know, coyote in English typically is somebody who helps get people across the border, a human smuggler in terms. So this is a man who had already been accused of federal charges of human trafficking. And this is the person that the left wanted to platform for sympathy for their cause. And again, the people that it hurts the most are the people who actually came into the country illegally under rough circumstances, but still strive to live and maintain a good life. They're being roped in with people like this, and they're wondering why the country keeps on turning away sympathetically from their cause. It's not the right that's doing this, it's the left. It's like putting in somebody who talked during class with a guy who, I mean, let's say threw something at the substitute teacher while the teacher was away. You know, I mean, grade school, you had the noisemakers list. If you put both of them on that list, when the teacher gets back, they're going to see the list and assume that, well, both of them deserve to be on that list. One person was talking to his friend trying to ask for help on the assignment at a time when they weren't supposed to and they got caught. Another person was intentionally trying to disrupt the class. But because of the way that the illicit publicity that the left agenda has gone on and has pushed, unfortunately, they get conflated. And to those who don't have the nuance to understand the situation, they're going to see all of the illegal migrants as criminals like Kilmar Abrego, because that's what the news media has been bringing out. You put him as the face, and when the real truth comes out, the people who have been seeing him as the face of this movement now have a criminal associated with the face of the movement. And innocent people are being caught in the crossfire, and it keeps on happening time and time again. It has to stop. Russia launched large-scale missile and drone attacks on Ukraine early Friday, killing at least 3 and injuring 49, according to Ukrainian officials. The strikes targeted Kiev, Lutsk, and Ternopil, and were described by Moscow as retaliation for recent Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian air bases. Russia's defense ministry said the attacks used high-precision, long-range weapons and targeted military infrastructure. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed that emergency workers were among the dead and said over 400 drones and 40 missiles were involved. The strikes follow Ukraine's spiderweb drone operation, which reportedly damaged a third of Russia's strategic missile carriers. Zelensky urged international allies, including the U.S., to increase pressure on Russia, indirectly criticizing former President Donald Trump's stance on the war. Air raid alerts were active in multiple regions, including Kiev, Kharkiv, Sumy, and Luhansk. Russia also claimed to have intercepted 174 Ukrainian drones overnight and multiple cruise missiles over the Black Sea. Peace talks in Istanbul earlier this month ended without progress as both sides failed to agree on ceasefire terms. Let's take a look.
Several people are dead after Russia launched an intense missile and drone barrage on Kyiv in the early hours on Friday, Ukrainian officials said. Powerful explosions shook the country as the attacks followed a warning of revenge from Russian President Vladimir Putin, conveyed via US President Donald Trump after Ukrainian drones destroyed several strategic bomber aircraft. Ukraine's foreign minister wrote on social media Russia had responded by attacking civilians, with multi-story buildings hit and energy infrastructure damaged. The Air Force said Russia had used 407 drones, one of the largest numbers recorded in a single attack. 45 cruise and ballistic missiles were also fired, it said. Russia's defense ministry said its forces had struck military and military-related targets in response to what it called Ukrainian terrorist acts. 3 of those killed in the attack were first responders who had rushed to the scene of one of the strikes, the country's interior minister said. This apartment building was struck in the attack, with this resident's home catching fire.
Usually we stay in the corridor during attacks, but this time my wife also insisted that we sleep in the corridor, so I can say that she saved my life.
President Volodymyr Zelensky said dozens of people nationwide had also been injured in the overnight attacks, which struck several other towns and cities. He called on Ukraine's Western allies to ramp up pressure on Russia. Ukraine's military said it had launched a preemptive strike overnight on airfields in 2 Russian regions, in addition to hitting at least 3 fuel reservoirs.
We've seen that recently there was a direct discussion for the first time since the war began between Russia and Ukraine over a ceasefire. And then, of course, with Ukraine's recent strike, which they said they've been planning for over a year, where they covertly sent trucks into the Russian state and then released their drones to target a third of the critical Russian air infrastructure. We knew that Russia was going to retaliate one way or another, and we've seen the retaliation. Of course, war isn't a game of tallying score or keeping score, but hopefully, if both sides can see this as a one-to-one, Russia did directly state this was a retaliation for that attack, hopefully then peace talks can continue and we can finally put an end to a pointless proxy war between the United Nations and NATO and Russia that has cost far too many lives. Too many lives as an acts of senseless violence. And now, let's take a look at the weather update. And to end the news today, a quick recap of the headlines. Federal officials condemn violent anti-ICE protests in Los Angeles and New York. GOP leaders urge Trump and Musk to reconcile amid feud. Real estate investor blames Fed Chair Powell for housing market struggles. And Colombian president vows action after teen arrested in shooting of presidential hopeful. And that's News Plus for today. Remember to join us same time tomorrow for more. I'm TGK Andre. Good night. God bless you.